Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another edition of CHP Talks. I'm here with a very special guest this week, Mr. Shaun Newman from Lloydminster. Shaun, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rod.
Okay, and for those who may not know, Shaun Newman is the host of the Shaun Newman Podcast. A husband and father of three, he started the podcast in 2019, focusing on faith, family, Canadian life, and some of the controversial topics that have divided society. With over 1,000 episodes, the daily news commentary podcast covers a wide range of subjects, including politics, economics, culture, and sports, and with no topic off limit. So, again, thank you so much for taking time from your work doing your podcast. Are you in your new studio, or is that still on the way?
It's still on the way. Yeah, we're getting closer, but I'm learning when you're building something, you have deadlines and you aim to hit them, but unforeseen things happen and you just gotta roll with the punches, so to speak. And we'll get in there this year for sure. We're just slowly picking away at things, and I'm pretty excited about it. It's going to be quite the spot, but until we get in there, this place here has been home for a long time, and well, it feels like home, so it's no pressure to get out of it by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure. And that's on the Alberta side, I presume.
The new studio is near the farm, so on the Saskatchewan side. The current studio is on the Alberta side, so welcome to the border city. Everything is a stone throw away from the border.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So let's start with, especially for those of our listeners who may not have tuned into your show in the past, a little bit about Shaun Newman, where you grew up, just a little bit about what led to your development and ultimately to being the host of the Shaun Newman podcast.
Sure. Well, I'm a small town, I grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan and love sports. Grew up in a family with four older siblings, so I was the fifth. And I was fortunate enough to play hockey for a good chunk of my early years. Found my way out to Ontario and then down in the States and across the pond into Finland. Nothing. I always say I wasn't close to the NHL, but I did get paid to play at the end, which was one of the goals I had. I learned at a young age I probably wasn't the size for the NHL, but I found a way on a junior A team and then into Division III. Met my wife along the way, and it ended in I guess it ended in senior hockey in Saskatchewan. I got to play a decade for my hometown of Hillmont and win a championship there and just lots of hockey. And when I came back from Finland, I I think a lot of hockey players can relate. You're done doing something you love and you've done all your life and you want to continue it, but for every athlete, there's a time in life where you have to make a choice. And when you come back from playing something like that, the options are almost paralyzing. Like you can do anything you want. It should be the most freeing thing, but it's the most paralyzing thing. And I wanted to go into radio. I wanted to do color commentating. And so I reached out to the guys I knew in the industry, and they all told me not to do it. That was kind of a bit of a gut punch. It's funny back then, the three things I got told was it's not going to pay very much. You're going to have to move wherever the job is, so you're never going to be in the same place. And you got to be the very best. And I laugh at those things because now as I get older, I'm like, that's pretty much true of any industry, right? If you're starting out in something you want to be good at, you're probably not going to get paid that much. And there's a good chance you're going to have to move to chase after your dreams. And so, I went to work in the oil field and worked there for a decade. And I don't know when it was, Rod. It was part way into it. I just was like, this just isn't what I want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that, being out in the oil field, I got a ton of respect for all the men and women who work in that industry. I just felt like there was something pulling at me and I just didn't know what it was. And I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast, probably roughly 2018, and we just started up a book club in Lloydminster as well. And I listened to it. I'm like, man, alive, I could do this. Like, so I wrote down in my mind people from around the Lloyd area that I had respected, and I thought, well, I wonder if I just started out nice and easy. I just started interviewing these people and just see if it would be something that would be worthwhile to do. And so I put it to the four guys in the book club, thinking, maybe that's not a good idea or whatever feedback they'd come back with. And they all came back saying, I think that's a great idea,
Yeah.
which was great, to have a little bit of support. And so, started out about as humble as you can get. My first interview was one of the guys in the book club. My second interview backed out, so I called up my dad. I interviewed my father. My third interview was the sound guy who would kind of set up the podcast for me because he told me you can't interview anyone. You got to find people. And I laughed. I said, I can interview wherever I want. And he kind of said, no, you need to have some big names. And said, I'll interview you. Done. Get on here. And so my third one was the sound guy. And then the fourth one was my brothers, which we still do to this day. We do brothers roundtables through the NHL playoffs. And, and then from there, it just took leaps and bounds. And I think my wife at times couldn't understand what I was doing. I'm not sure I understood what I was doing, but I understood I wanted to be consistent at it. I didn't want to do one interview and then wait a month and then do one more. And, it was something like once I started doing it, I'm like, oh man, I really enjoy this. And so while I was working in the oil field, I was waking up at 5 a.m. to do interviews. I was interviewing people all over the place. And, COVID, for all its detriments, really helped that out because I was forced to do this, get on Zoom and interview people. So, well, that opened up. I could start interviewing people out on the East Coast and elsewhere, and I could work it into my schedule. And so for from 2019 until 2022, I worked in the oil field full time, and then I started doing this, quite regularly. Obviously, to me, a confidence booster was I had the city of Lloyd approach me and see if I would interview some pillars of the community for the Lloydminster archives.
Mm.
And so every Sunday for 4 hours, I'd sit back and do two back-to-back interviews. And so, with a young family and a full-time job, and then trying to make this, I don't know what I thought I was doing. I just kept interviewing people. I like hearing what people have to say, and it graduated and it's graduated, and to where for the last 3 years I've been doing it full time.
Yeah, well, excellent. And that's what a story. And I guess the timing with COVID really was significant for, I mean, so many podcasts have come into being as a result of some of the COVID controversies, I guess, for one thing. And the fact that people had to rely on electronic means of communication to a large extent for a period of time. It was a pleasure to be with you at the Injection of Truth conference that you were the MC for. I think you've been the MC at more than one, but I was at one in Calgary. I'm not sure what the date was. I didn't look back to see what the date was, but that was a tremendous event, and you're surrounded by a lot of very interesting, very capable people who are thinking about very serious topics having to do with the future of the country, the future of Alberta, and all those types of things. Um, Maybe just briefly before we go into some of the political side of things, how did the COVID era and the protocols and all the thinking about the freedom and going along with the crowd or standing up for what you believe and maybe taking a hit for it as some of our Canadian citizens have done. Um, how did that affect you personally and your family? What did you think about that whole time and how did you reconcile your feelings with what was actually going on in the wider culture?
Well, I was reluctant to talk about COVID. I was reluctant to pick my head up. I got a ton of time for anyone who, whatever path they chose through COVID. Um, I got a ton of time for everyone because, that was a very difficult time. And what made my role in it unique, I guess, was I was, episode 198, 199, somewhere in there. I interviewed Peter McCullough. And episode 200, I had Glenn Sather. So you can understand that for me, I wanted to talk. I was getting frustrated because nobody was talking about it. And I know there was a ton now that were talking about it, just nothing in my realm, I guess. And I was sitting here, there was a group of us. We were meeting in, old bull barns and renting some community spaces and getting together and trying to figure out what the heck was going on. We were bringing together, different doctors and lawyers and having them come talk to us because everybody's just trying to figure it out. And, the further I get along, the more people I meet that had it figured out. For me specifically, there was lots of gut check moments of like, am I really going to do this? For my wife, she's been very supportive the entire time, but I built a name for myself of being a very community minded person. I helped raise money for the Health Foundation year after year. We almost lost my third, almost lost my wife on my third. And so the Health Foundation written a story about that. And the reason I bring it up is because then, I started talking about doctors and they didn't have much to say about good things to say about the health as a whole, the doctors and nurses and everything. And that was difficult. So I went from having a very loyal fan base because I was talking sports and I thought in a healthy way, talking about perseverance and what it takes to get to the next level and the lessons they'd learned out of playing high end sports, to some of the most outspoken individuals of that time. And it was difficult. And like back then, I wasn't a believer in any God. I wasn't a believer in, so I didn't have that to lean on. And it was difficult, but I was thankful for my wife and for the book club specifically because anytime I needed picked up, they picked me up. And I needed picked up an awful lot back then because I was still working in the oil field. I would go in, I'd record with Peter McCullough or take your pick of, maybe some more household names these days. And then I'd have to go work my job. And and those two worlds didn't really mesh that well. And I was, I was another worker forced with do this or else. And those were difficult days, but I'm thankful for them.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I couldn't see what God was doing with me because I was, I wasn't having those types of conversations. I wasn't even remotely interested in them. I always tell to the person with faith, if I go back, I interviewed Reuben Mays. He was a running back for the New Orleans Saints, and he'd grown up in North Battleford. And I don't know, was it episode 80? I don't think it matters. It was early on. And he just said at the very end, "Oh, by the way, I just want to say thanks be to God for everything in my life." And
Wow.
I almost edited it out. I almost because that's where I was. I just if there's some things you don't do on a sports show, it's talk
Yeah.
about politics and talk about God, right? Those are roughly the two things. And that kind of been beaten into my head. And now, I mean, as you rattle off what the show's about, I've done a full 180 on that, and we talk about different things. There's nothing that comes up that makes me go like that anymore for the most part. So I guess I don't know if that answers your question, but COVID was a difficult time, and on this side, I'd love to say I got it all right, that I knew exactly what I was doing. I just kept talking to people. I thought if you're going to shut down conversations, that didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And so I just kept talking to people because none of it made sense. And I mean, 1,000 podcasts later, that number even shocks me. It's, I don't have the plan, and I can't see the plan. I just try and follow where I'm led, and trust that by having you know being willing to listen to what people have to say, that there's answers in there that are going to direct us all on where we're supposed to be going.
So along the way, you mentioned you said you used to not be interested in God or
Yeah.
express yourself in a faith manner of faith in the living God. So since you've brought that up, you would you like to just broaden that out a little bit? What happened in your life? I think that you're hinting that God has become a larger part of your life now.
Well, I went to the convoy. I went to Ottawa, and Ottawa represents a lot for a lot of different people. But I'm talking specifically about the Freedom Convoy. I was there when the trucks got into Ottawa. I was in the room with all the negotiating, leading people of what it was. I was there when the cops rolled in. Uh, yeah, this is a simple podcaster from Lloydminster. I was kind of like, what the heck am I doing here? To be honest, like, what is going on? I just want to tell the government I'm not happy with what's going on. I believe in what this is about. And I believed in their message of like no violence. We're not here to hurt anyone. We're just here to protest the government because things have gotten out of control and we need it to stop. I believed in all that. And over the course of about 5, 6 days, Rod, just strange things started happening that I could not put my finger on. And, now I know it's spiritual warfare, but at the time, I didn't even know what that was. And so I sat there, and over the course of 5 days, um, I would have said back then I lost my mind. Like I had my family come and get me. I was a shell of myself.
Yeah.
When it comes to podcasting, I've never missed a deadline. And then I took 53 days off after the convoy to kind of like go see a psychologist, get drug tested, like all the things because I was not myself for a few days. And so after that, I spent 6 months to a year really wrestling with what on earth had happened. And I got to interview Frank Peretti, and that was like I never knew who that even was. But then I got to read This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness, and there's parts in his story I lived out in Ottawa. And so for hopefully the listener, they know exactly what that book's about. It's about spiritual warfare, good versus evil, and it's about things that you can't see interacting in the human experience. And there's just parts in it that I'm like, basically took me to tears because I'm reading it and I'm like, I've lived that out. I mean, like, oh man. So I'm sitting there across from Frank Peretti, and 6 months earlier, I didn't even know who he was, and it just I had a moment in Calgary where I'd ran into a shaman, and it just unnerved me to, I'm searching for answers. Like, give me
Yeah.
the answers.
Yeah.
Like, what is the answer? And then I had this experience where I was very uncomfortable, and it felt like Ottawa all over again. And so I went back because I sent this text. I was sitting at supper with a whole group of people. And everybody's where's everybody staying tonight? And I didn't have a place to stay. And in my brain, I'm like, oh, I'll probably stay at the hotel with them. And so I challenged God. I'm not saying you should do that, but I said, if you're real, here's your chance. So I texted my brother's best friend. I said, do you have a place for me to stay tonight? It was probably, I don't know, 9 o'clock at night. And I said in my head, I'm like, if it gets around to me and he hasn't texted back, I'm going where they're going because I guess that's where I'm supposed to be. And I looked down at the phone and dinged, I don't know, two people before me, and it said, you always have a place to stay. And I almost cried right there. And that night I went to his house, walked up into my bedroom, got down on bended knee, and prayed. And I said, I just can't do this alone anymore. Like, I don't know what's going on to me. I don't know why I'm like having these experiences that make no sense. And it was just like immediate. It was just, the same feeling I have here telling the story. It was immediate. And I don't know how to explain that to people who've never had that before, but I couldn't write that off anymore because things have been going on that didn't make sense. And so after I'd had that experience, then I went and asked my mom for a Bible. I said, could I have a Bible? So she gave me one of her Bibles, and I started reading it, and I didn't know how to read it. Like I'm like, where do I even begin? And I was kind of annoyed with it. It's taken time and investment in reading it. Fast forward, it's been it's probably been 3 years or close to it. And I read it every day, read it in the mornings. And I'm always shocked at how much wisdom is sitting in those pages.
Yeah.
And I've never looked back. I've the amount of peace that I've had, when dealing with the spiritual world after I just let Jesus in. It was simple. Just I let it in, boom. There's lots of things in Ephesians that talk about it. I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And if I didn't know what it was just happening. And I would go, oh, that was bizarre. I have no idea what that was. That was pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
And it just kept confronting me over and over and over. And, I got plenty of stories even after accepting Jesus that I'm like, that was something. Like I don't know what to say about that. And so with my career now with podcasting, there's very few things that go on in my life that make a profound, like, boom, hit you square across the head that don't bleed out on the podcast. Because I don't know how to like keep something like that a secret. It's like, how do you just
But
hide that one
yeah.
away? Certainly I wrestle with it myself before I start talking about it. But then I started asking people about God. I'm like, well, what do you think about God? Like, where are you at? And it's just, and then a ton of people were upset by that. But I mean, I don't know. It's been one of the most important things that's happened to me. When you think about your life and why did things have to happen the way they are? I'm like, I'd watched this video, Rod, and you probably have your own stories
Oh,
about this, but I watched this video of highly capable people, and if you give them something that's a challenge, they find ways to overcome it. I was one of those people, and so God has to put something so impossible in front of you that you can't rationalize it out. And when I watched that, I was like, yeah, because like when I came back, I'm like, I don't know what's going on to me. Like I thought I was partially losing my mind, but then I'd run into people that were predominantly Christians, and they'd be like, "You're not losing your mind." And I'm like, "Well, why is nobody talking about this?" Well, because they'll think you're crazy.
yeah.
Like they already think I'm crazy. They thought I was crazy for everything I did in COVID. I've already been ostracized from part of society, and another part of society has shown me they're clearly there. So why aren't we talking about this more? Well, you're not allowed to. I'm like, wow, tech with that. I want to talk about this because this is literally happening in my life, and I'm either going to lose my mind or I'm going to start talking about it, and some things are going to start to make sense. So I started inviting, he just had his man camp. I invited the cowboy preacher on a couple of years ago, and he said some things, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I agree with all that, but I got to think about that. And then Tanner Naday's been on multiple times, and I really enjoyed Jordan Peterson. And Jordan Peterson did one specific thing for me that, no other person probably could have done, is he made the Bible make sense, and he wrote about it in a way that I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So he always said, aim at a goal, and then point at it and just keep going for it. And, and for me, it was the truth. And then me and Tanner Naday got, well, what is the truth? And I was like, oh, what do you mean? He's like, well, Jesus is the way. And I'm like, I don't know what I think about that, and I'd have to sit there and wrestle with that. But the more I read and the more you dig into it, the more things just start to unfold in front of you. Like, man, alive. I don't want to ever go back to Ottawa. I don't, the painting, not the painting, the photograph behind me. I'll lower my mic for a second so you can see.
Yep.
Well, that's the worst day of my life, pretty much. And that is me praying in front of the Peace Tower. I befriended a photographer, and who could have seen the events unfold after we'd talked? But he followed me around because he was nervous, and in his own words, he was nervous of what I was going to do. I don't know if that means self harm. I don't know if it means harm to other people. I don't know. I was not having a great day, and he took that photo. And I didn't think that day had happened. And then he sent it to me about 2 weeks after the Freedom Convoy and said, "This is just for you. I just wanted you to have this." And I'm like, oh. And so, I've been wrestling with a bunch of things. And if I'm wrestling with it, I just think how many other people are wrestling with it and nobody will listen. Nobody will go like, this crazy thing happened. They're like, you just figment of your imagination. I'm like, no, I've literally lived some things that I'm like, I never want to ever, ever go back there. But because of those things, it set me on a collision course with digging into the Bible and starting to wrestle with what it talks about. And through that, I've found a peace that, man, it is something. I just can't. Obviously, it got me gibbering on about it. I just can't. I can't hide from it anymore. It's very real, and I think life is better knowing that it's very real.
That's fantastic. A fantastic story. In fact, I think one of the transition points for me in my early 20s was I was hitchhiking in Manitoba, and it was getting to be a dark, rainy night, and I needed a place to stay as well. And there was a Catholic church there in this little small town, and I basically said, God, if you're real, I'd like to sleep in that church. And I went and you expect things to be locked, but I pushed and the door opened, and that was one of the things that happened in my life. My brother, who became a Christian, he's with Jesus now, passed away many years ago, but his daughter had come down with meningitis, and he said basically, God, if you're real, heal my daughter, and I'll serve you. And so God did, and he did. So there's transition points for a lot of people, and thank you for sharing that story. It's very, very powerful.
Well, I mean, people have shared their stories with me, Rod,
Yeah,
and it's helped me. If it helps one person, I
yeah,
mean, like that. I mean, I don't know. I was just one person, and people. Uh, Shout out to Seth Bloom, because Seth Bloom was one of the first guys I talked to, and he's been on the podcast a couple times with his family for things that have gone on in their life through COVID. And I was trying to rationalize it out when I came back, and I said, he said, give me the story, and I said, well, it's one of four things. You take your pick, and I can talk about it. He said, well, what are the four things? And I said, stress, lack of sleep, drugs and alcohol, and spiritual. He goes, well, we all know it's spiritual, so just tell me the story. I'm like, you're not going to believe a word I'm going to say. And he said, try me. And it was really important to have somebody believe in what I was saying, because I thought I'd lost my mind. Like I just can't begin to you know, try and explain how difficult that time was. It wasn't just difficult on me, it was difficult on my wife and my kids. Like I'm sure they were like, what on earth happened? And I couldn't explain it because people wanted to rationalize it out as all the first three. And the first three were there. I'm not here to deny that all three of those weren't there. I mean, was anyone not stressed at that point in time in 2022? I would say probably not. And it was just, I'm very thankful for having strong men around me who would listen to what I had to say, and then find different guys who, because now I'm surrounded by it. I'm just surrounded by
yeah,
so many guys
yeah,
that you can't say anything too out of bounds that they're like, ah, that doesn't make sense, because they have their own experiences. They have their own Catholic Church story where God showed up for them. And the crazy thing about it is anytime I'm doubting it, I'm like, I don't know, maybe, yeah. I'll just have one of those experiences again where I'm like, man, alive. I don't even, how, how can I possibly be that important that that much effort is being put into my life to ensure I stay on the right path? It is, there's no words for it, to be honest.
yeah. That's amazing. And I think the interview you did with um, uh, you just said his name, the Frank Peretti.
Frank
Frank,
Brady.
that was one of the first episodes of yours that I listened to, and it was quite amazing because my wife and I had both read both those books. She had the Christian bookstore here in Smithers for 24 years, and early in that time, those books came out and we read them, and they really impacted us. And we were, so I thought it was very interesting that you you were able to get hold of Frank Peretti and have that discussion with him.
Well,
And
can I tell you about the
yeah,
Frank Peretti?
yeah,
You want to talk about like just wild experiences? Because if I was having my choice of Like I really want to sit with this person. I'm telling the audience, I didn't know who Frank Peretti was. I grew up going to church. I'd never heard the name Frank Peretti. And so Seth Bloom enters the story again because, after we'd talked and he'd said, "Oh, it's definitely spiritual." He sent me this keynote speech, I guess I'd call it. I might have thought of it more of a sermon, but it was Frank Peretti. And I listened to it, and he kind of sounded like Jeff Foxworthy, and it didn't really make any sense to me. And I was kind of like, whatever. I just, well, okay, whatever. And I kind of wrote it off. And Seth Bloom sent it again to me, and I opened it up, and I'd already watched it, and I kind of wrote it off again. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a Jeff Foxworthy guy. And Seth kept saying something along the lines of, this guy's can really powerful voice. You should really listen to him. And I was like, yeah, whatever. So we get close to hockey season, and my son was going to be playing, I think it was first year in U9, and he needed a practice jersey. And so I in my head, I'm like, well, I'm not going to go out and buy a brand new practice jersey. I'll go to the secondhand store. There will be a bunch of secondhand jerseys. I'll find one there. And so I go in and I find a practice jersey. And I as you can see over my shoulder, I like books, right? Even if I don't read them all, there's something about books that is so enticing me. It's like every book can have its own world you can go, roam around in. And so there was this, in the secondhand store, they had this room full of old books. And, one person's garbage is another person's treasure. And so I was trying to talk myself out of not going in there. Probably shouldn't go in there because, Shaun, you're going to get sucked in. You're going to buy 4 books that you have no use for or whatever. Yeah. But I went in. So I went in and I'm looking around, Rod. Yeah, there's atlases and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And, that's kind of, I don't know. And so I prayed. Said, God, if there's something in here you want me to read, I'd appreciate some help. Like, just direct me to where you are. And so I didn't think much of it. And that was early on in my walk. I was like, I don't even know if that worked. Did that work? I don't know. And so I'm looking at the books, and here comes this Frank Peretti. And I go, hey, why do I know that name? Like, I know that name. So I grab it, and then I went, wait a second. How do I know this is you? Well, I open the front cover, and it's Ephesians 6. And I'm like, okay, point taken. So I closed it up. I bought it for I think $1, maybe 50 cents. It's this one right here.
Okay.
And so it's 2 books in one. It's both books in one. And it is a rough, here, I'm pulling it apart, folks, so you can know that it's a secondhand book. And please return to Marion Morgan. So shout out to Marion Morgan, who eventually donated that, because it was sitting there for me. And so I take it home. Now, in my mind, I think I've just bought a biography on Frank Peretti. I still haven't. I don't even know what this is. And so I open it up, and let's see what this Frank Peretti's got. And I read the first page and a half, and I'm like, what is this book? This is not a biography. This is fiction or something. Is that an angel? Is that what that is? Anyways, and so then I Googled them and read I don't know, 3 sentences. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's an author? I'm like, I had no idea. And then I'm like, he wrote oh, okay. And so then I started reading it, and that book was so timely in my life because I was still wrestling with what was going on. And I just accepted that Jesus was real. Okay, you're real. All right. Okay, I can feel it. That's great. Now I don't know what else you're supposed to do. And so this Frank Peretti thing, comes out of a secondhand bookstore, never knowing anything. And then I read the first one, and I'm like, I got to have this guy on. So I just started talking about it every podcast. I'd be like, Rod, in the middle of an interview, do you know who Frank Peretti is? And you go, yeah. Do you know how to get a hold of him? I don't know. And listeners started chiming in all over the place. And they started reaching out to bookstores. They started reaching out to everyone they knew. And it was dead end after dead end after dead end. And a shout out to Ben Trudeau and his group, because they literally got a hold of him. And he wasn't doing interviews, but he said he'd do one for me. And so we did the interview. And after he talked to me for probably an hour, it was a very, in the surreal moments of my podcasting career, it was one of those special moments, because I must have said something that triggered it, because I said something about racing and trying to find the answers. And he slowed me down. He said, It's a journey. Go at your own pace. It's a journey. There's no race here. Just go at your own pace. It's been some of the best advice I've gotten. Anytime I'm struggling or think I'm supposed to be somewhere else, it's like, no, just be where your feet are at. Be in the present moment. You're struggling, pick up the Bible. I was telling my wife I was in Calgary last week, Rod, and the Shaun of 30 years old, I'm 39 now, probably would have fell over backwards if he would have saw I'm sitting it's a Monday night. I'm sitting at the Grey Eagle Casino. I'm in the hotel. And I'm not a big gambler, but I don't mind a little bit of blackjack or something. And it is 9 o'clock on a Monday night. I got three young kids. I could be doing anything in the world. And I'm sitting there reading the Bible. And I even caught myself and started laughing. I'm like, this is kind of funny, Like this isn't who you were. And I guess I just share the story of Frank and all this because it's really made an impact on my life. And I trying really hard to walk in the path that he's laying out in front of me. And at times it's super easy. At times I stumble probably like the rest of us. And I don't know. It's been the last 3 years have been nothing short of adventurous. And there's twists and turns and everything in between. But that's me rambling on, and I appreciate you listening.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that so much. And wanted to be, while we have you on here, and there's a lot going on in the world politically, we've just gone through a federal election that was probably disappointing to most of the people that you
That
and I
are tuning in.
I would say. But certainly, some things are happening that are of earth-shattering impact, I would say, and in terms of policies that are being made, things that people are living through. We see a lot of drama down below us in below the border there in the U.S. Some of it good, some of it, really bad. We see, wars going on in the Ukraine and in the Middle East, and all this stuff is happening along with our own personal journeys. So in Alberta, part of what has happened in in all this ruckus, the hubbub and the confusion, we had this election, and it appears that Donald Trump's statement about making Canada the 51st state, I mean, whatever that meant to him and to people close to him, it seemed to echo around in Canada in a way was certainly used by Mark Carney and the Liberals to motivate people, kind of a fear of being taken over, I guess, whatever. So all of a sudden, we've got this major shift in public opinion, and the Liberals that were going to go down in defeat to lose party status in December now are back at the controls in Ottawa. In the meantime, Danielle Smith, you're the Premier of Alberta, is taking some, I guess, some pretty dramatic steps. She's making some statements that are certainly being picked up by people in Alberta and across the country. And I think it appears that she and the Alberta, um, the population of Alberta, the province of Alberta are going to have a pretty big impact on what happens in Canada and maybe even what happens in Canada-US trade. So that's a lot. There's a lot there. I attended the Injection of Truth conference that I mentioned that you were the MC for, and a lot of those people there, Eric Bouchard, that you've interviewed a few times, and he's kind of a mover and shaker in the Alberta government, and has taken on a lot of a lot of causes, a lot of issues that maybe others were afraid to touch. I don't know. I don't know where I really want to go with the question, but can you speak about Alberta? What's going on in Alberta? There's even talk, pretty strong talk, I understand, about Alberta independence, sovereignty, and certainly short of that, having a much larger impact on the country. So maybe I just throw it out to you as as a grab bag there. You can go wherever you want with that discussion about Alberta's role in our current national kind of economy and environment.
Well, I've always wondered what is it about Alberta that's different because it is a raucous bunch, you know? Like Danielle Smith gets elected, people a week after aren't happy. They want more. And they just will not settle. And I've come to really enjoy it because uh we're in difficult spots and lots of different things, you know. And from the interviews I've done, like the difficult times aren't done, right? Like there's lots of things coming down the pipe, especially with a Carney-led Liberal government. I don't for one second believe that he's gonna right the ship. I just you can't. I mean, you just can't make me believe that. And so, that election going the way it did, it set off what I think most Albertans knew was going to happen if the Liberals got in. And the same thing happened in 2019 when Wexit became a really big popular movement. And I don't know why it wasn't picked up back then. Maybe COVID hadn't happened yet, and some things like that needed to happen in order to really galvanize part of the population. And now, am I saying that, independence is a foregone conclusion? Certainly not. Like there's just definitely appetite for it. Everywhere the Alberta Prosperity Project goes, they're getting 400, 500 people in a hall, showing up to listen about what an Alberta independent movement could look like, what that could mean for the province. And I think there's a real appetite for that conversation. And certainly it wouldn't have been there if Pierre Poilievre had been elected. You don't have to love the Conservatives, just a change of the guard would have dampened things down.
Yeah.
Instead, Liberals get back in. What?
Yeah.
What are we talking about here? And that's raised more heads. People that were awake and doing things during COVID and saw how they were treated already had their heads up. As soon as the Liberals got back in again, after our country is in the toilet after 10 years, after some of the things they've been pushing across the country, after how we've handled ourselves, with the United States and others, it just, at some point, you got to go like, what are we supposed to do? We vote a certain way. The East votes different. We get the Liberals back in. And so there is a real conversation happening right now, and where does that land here in the next year? I think there's going to be a referendum. I think there is. I believe that. Does that mean that you leave? No, certainly not. It's got to be voted on by the public. If the public doesn't want to leave, then we won't leave. It's simple as that. Um, but there is an absolute conversation being had right now. It's just, where does it go and what happens here over the course of the next few months? I mean, we got summer staring us right in the face, and I don't know about you, but every other Canadian I talk to, every other Albertan I talk to, our summers are so short. People just want to get outside and enjoy the sun and
Yeah.
be around their kids and, and all the things, even just do yard work for Pete's sake. So, like there's some tough sledding ahead for the Alberta independence movement, but I mean, everywhere they go, they're getting hundreds of people showing up. And can they grow that? And can that actually turn into something? Yeah, I think so.
One of the issues that has been an issue, we lived in Alberta back in the late 70s, early 80s. One of the issues that's always been a topic in Alberta is the equalization payments, where, Alberta's prosperity, wealth, the resource wealth, and the energy and so on have been kind of kept Canada going, and yet there is this distinct perception that the rest of Canada, by and large, doesn't appreciate that, and now currently, both on the left coast with David Eby And in Quebec, there's, resistance to Alberta even having the pipelines by which it can get its products to market, even to market within Canada, let alone overseas. So, do you think that the threat of Alberta possibly wanting to separate is going to have an impact? And I agree with you, Mark Carney's not going to solve our country's problems, but he may be enough of a pragmatic person to make some changes, at least in the economic side of things, in order not to lose Alberta. What do you think about that?
Well, pragmatic and government just don't go together for me. So, I look at Russia, Ukraine, and I don't know where your audience is at on that, but I've done way too many conversations to realize how close we are to nuclear war. So the
Yeah.
pragmatic thing would be to sit down and discuss and stop killing people and stop pushing to where more people will certainly die if they ever push the nuclear button. Instead, that is not what happens. They continue on. We continue to go down this road. And so, when I talk to the people that are, in my opinion, in the know, it's like they believe in something and they believe they can win. And so they're going to push on, and that's what they're going to do. And if I'm Mark Carney in that group, I don't think they think Alberta is going to leave. I think I probably believe that they don't think it can get done. I would say they don't believe that there's the willpower to get it done.
Yeah.
And I just don't see pragmatism enter into the conversation of the government. You tell me, you've been around this a lot longer than I have. Rod, you
Well,
seen much common sense enter the government facility? No, we all laugh. We're all sitting here. Somebody's driving down the road and they just swerve laughing because they're like, "Yeah, you're right. That doesn't enter. Those two things do not go together." So pragmatism, no. I think Carney is going to do what is best for him and the people that he represents. And is that Albertans? No, I don't think so. He talks a big game. He just said, "Oh, we're going to have pipelines in the next 2 years." Yet, as soon as you go down those roads, you realize how many groups, how many levels of red tape there are to get project. I mean, like they've been trying to do this for the last 20 years. Also, Mark Carney's going to come in and be the savior of that. I have a hard time believing that. Knowing everywhere he's come from and everything else, I have a hard time swallowing that pill. Sad to say.
yeah. Okay. Um, and Shaun, you've been generous with your time. I really appreciate it. I don't know what the rest of your day is looking like, but before we close, I want to touch on the Stanley Cup Finals. Uh, and we used to live close to Edmonton, and I have to admit, I am not any kind of a hockey aficionado. I was raised in the States. I think more about football and baseball probably than I do about
who's
hockey.
your team, Rod, in football and baseball then?
Well, I like the Steelers when Ben Roethlisberger was,
Roethlisberger, yeah.
and actually, so I've had a lot of favorite teams. I kind of move around, but as a kid, I lived in Minneapolis. I lived in Green Bay, where we could actually hear them cheering when I never went to a game. I was just a kid, but we could hear them cheering when someone scored at Lambeau Field. So we lived in New York, close to Philadelphia, and I lived south of Buffalo. So I had, just geographically, I had teams that I was interested in, but usually I like somebody on a team, and that kind of attracts me to the team. But it's not. I don't live and die for any of those sports, but hockey I know less about. I
Okay.
didn't play hockey as a kid or anything like that. So, but you've been in hockey to a high level, and so when we were in Alberta, that's when Gretzky was at his height. I knew who Gretzky was. That was sort of my
People in China knew who Gretzky
yeah.
was, right? Like, I mean,
So
he was larger than the sport.
so anyway, so I was an Oilers fan as far as that a non-hockey person could be.
Sure.
But what do you think's going to happen? There's been a couple of I have watched a couple of these games, and the last one was pretty sad, I would say, for the Oilers. But what do you think? Is there a chance for them to pull it off?
Oh, certainly. First and foremost, yeah, it was a tough game. But if I'm a hockey player, I'd rather get run out of the building like that than lose a heartbreaker like they did in game two, where you score with 20 some seconds left, then you fight for two overtimes and you finally lose. That one stings more than 6-1 in my opinion.
Okay.
And the thing about a best of seven is, yes, you get shelled in one game. You get to go back. You get to look at the game tape. You get to go, let's not do that again. You almost get to just like forget about it. Just forget about it. There's nothing, here's all the things we did wrong. Let's show up and win a game. And when you look at the Stanley Cup finals, it's been the same two teams back to back years. Florida's been there 3 straight years. These are the two best teams in the NHL right now. And when they play each other, you can just see it. It's just like, man alive, these two teams, this I've been saying this is probably the best finals I've seen since Detroit and Pittsburgh went back to back years in the late 2000 or like early 2000s, 2008, 2009, I think were the 2 years. And so do the others have a shot? Oh yeah. Like I mean, if you know, if there's one thing this team does well is every time you think, they're done. They're down 2-0 to LA. They are done. I remember thinking we're going to get swept. I remember being on a podcast saying that. Like, they don't pick it up. We're going to get swept.
Yeah.
And what do? They run 4 straight.
Yeah.
They lose, they sit their starting goaltender, in comes Pickard, and they just find ways to win. They got two of the best, if not the best, players in the world on their team, in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. So don't count them out. And they're hungry. They haven't won the cup. McDavid has looked like he is on a mission. He hasn't. I don't know if he's smiled yet. It's like there ain't no smiling until we hoist that thing.
Yeah.
So if I were to give a prediction, I'd hoped the Oilers in 5, and then we started doing some research into Crosby. And the first year they lost to Detroit when they made the finals, and the next year they came. I thought they won in like 5 or 6. It took 7. I'm like, well, if it takes Crosby and Malkin 7 games to dethrone the Detroit Red Wings, I think it takes the Edmonton Oilers 7 games to dethrone the Florida Panthers. But they are both incredible teams. And any other year, if either one of them makes it against any other team, I just they're so good that I just feel like they probably walk all over them. But they got their hands full, no doubt about that. Florida Panthers are a very good hockey team. Their goaltender's playing exceptionally well. But yeah, the Oilers have a chance. I mean, never doubt 97. That guy is on another planet, and he's going to probably try and will him across the finish line. And, one of the things I love about sports is you get to see heroes come out of nowhere. And as much as McDavid and Draisaitl are going to drive the bus, there will be a guy or two that step out of the shadows and tuck a couple home. And that's my homer take, because I'm obviously, as people probably have realized, I'm an Oilers fan. I've been watching them my entire life. We suffered through a decade of darkness. We lost in Game 7 in 06. We lost in 07 games last year after being down 3-0 and thinking, holy crap, we're going to win it. We don't. So I think it's time. But, they got to play the games. They gotta find ways to beat a very good hockey club.
Yeah. Well, as a Canadian, even I would certainly like to see Canada get the cup this year. And I'll ask you one, and I don't, as a person who doesn't watch a lot of hockey, I am watching these Stanley Cup finals, and I will watch with friends if there's someone watching, or if I know one of the young guys playing locally or whatever, I'll go to a hockey game. But one thing I don't like about hockey is the fighting. And I don't know what you've been in it. And I understand it's high speed. There's collisions, some of which are unplanned, some of which are planned. But I kind of wish that all hockey players would take a step back in terms of the fighting, because that really kind of ruins it for me when they go at it. So any comments you want to make about fighting in hockey?
One of the things I love about Jesus is he walks in and he flips the tables over. And you think he's just this peaceful guy. And that story tells me he wasn't. And so one of the things I love about hockey is there's the game within the game within the game. And just like, what the Liberals did with elbows up and Donald Trump bad and,
Yeah.
we got this enemy, is sports is no different. Your star player's getting bullied. Somebody's got to step up and somebody's got to take care of it. So it doesn't mean throwing punches every time. But you have to stand up for your teammates. And the game of hockey has evolved insanely since even I played, and even back then, the old timers were talking about how much it had evolved. And I just watch, you're getting bullied by Florida, nothing is going right, and so they go back to the old tactic of, well, let's hack somebody in the arm, and if they want to drop the mitts, we're going to drop the mitts. And there isn't a part of me that is sad by that. I'm like, you're frustrated. You're going to take it out on somebody, and that's what a 7-game series does. If it's a best of one, it's the NFL. There's no time for that. But in a best of 7, this is a version of war, of attrition, of beating each other up and seeing who can go to the distance. So I have all the time in the world for it. It doesn't mean that it should happen every game because it shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right? You have to, if you get in penalty trouble, the other team's power play gets going, and we've seen quick work from both sides. But, when it's a 6-1 blowout, well, there's a reason why, the lots of the star players aren't playing anymore because people are going out looking for it. I mean, Florida literally grabbed Ekholm. I was upset that somebody didn't hop off the bench and throttle that guy, if I'm being completely honest. But no, I got a ton of time for the physicality of hockey. I think it's it's just another part of what makes the sport great.
Okay. Well, that we would be on opposite teams on that topic. I would like to see zero violence, intentional violence like the fist fights and whatever. But um, certainly, I recognize that it's hockey, right? So, well,
I'd love to,
Shaun,
if I could, Rod, I'd love to
yeah,
see zero violence in society.
yeah,
But, you know, evil does exist. Bad people do bad things. And sometimes good people need to step in and shield people from what's going on. And so I think about that a lot. It's like, how do we ever get to this society that never has any of that? And yet, almost every story in the Bible, you go back to the beginning of time. It's part of what the human nature is. There's good, there's bad, and they wrestle. And sometimes that's physical blows, sometimes that's verbally, sometimes, but it just keeps playing out. And an old timer who played for the Buffalo Sabres and the Boston Bruins had told me once upon a time that hockey mirrors society. And so why isn't there as much fighting as, well, I mean, society is not really there anymore, right? It's changed as well. And so hockey, you want all the fighting out? Well, let's get all the conflict out of society first. But we both can probably agree that isn't going to happen
yeah,
anytime soon,
yeah,
right? Like there's two sides to this coin, and at times they have to come face to face. And in my opinion, I'm not promoting going out and doing violence or anything like that. It's quite far from that. But you need to stick up for what you believe in. You need to stick up for your family and your friends. And on a hockey team, that's what it is. It becomes your family and your friends. And in a best of 7, or as the Oilers and the Panthers are doing, how many games they've played over the last 2 months. They're in their own world right now, and it's a battle to get 3 more wins for the Oilers, 2 more for Florida. And it'll be fun watching no matter what. Anytime you want to stop by, Rod, you do. We'll sit on the couch and we'll watch an Oiler game, and we can hash that out some more.
wonderful. Well, thank you very much, and Shaun Newman, thank you for being with us today. What a treat to have you on Shaun Newman Podcast. We're going to put a link to that in the show notes, but we certainly recommend our viewers and listeners to tune in and have a listen to some of Shaun's great interviews. You get some tremendous guests on there. Frank Peretti was just one of them, but you've had a lot of amazing people on there, and you're one of them. So thanks.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me on, Rod. Honestly, it's an honor to sit here and talk with you.
And look forward to seeing you again, and give you a shout if I'm passing through Lloyd.
Please do.
All right. Thanks. God bless you. Take care.